Hello everyone and welcome to our first episode of Weird History, where we explore the most bizarre and fascinating stories from the past. Today, we're going to look at some of the strangest events that actually happened in history but are so unbelievable that you might think they are made up. From a cat that survived 3 shipwrecks, to a city that was duplicated by a rival king, to a marathon that was a total disaster, these are some of the history's weirdest moments that you need to know about. Let's get started. The unsinkable cat. Cats are known for having 9 lives, but one cat in particular seemed to have more than his fair share of luck. His name was Oscar, but he was also known as Unsinkable Sam, because he survived 3 sinking ships during World War II. Oscar started his naval career as a ship's cat aboard the German battleship Bismarck, which was sunk by the British in 1941. Oscar was found floating on a board by the British sailors, who took him aboard and named him Oscar. He then joined the crew of the HMS Cossack, which was torpedoed and sunk by a German submarine later that year. Oscar survived again and was transferred to the HMS Ark Royal, which was also torpedoed and sunk by another German submarine in 1941. Oscar was rescued once more and taken to Gibraltar, where he retired from his naval service and lived out the rest of his days on land. The duplicate city. Imagine if someone decided to build an exact replica of your city and claim it as their own. That's what happened in the 6th century CE, when the Persian king Khosrow I sacked the Roman city of Antioch and captured its inhabitants. Instead of destroying the city or enslaving its people, Khosrow decided to do something even more bizarre. He built a new city that looked almost exactly like Antioch and called it Antioch Khosrow, which means Khosrow made this city better than Antioch. He then relocated the original Antiochians to his new city and treated them well. Khosrow's motive for this strange act is unclear, but some historians suggest that he wanted to show off his power and wealth, or that he had a genuine admiration for Roman culture. The disaster marathon. The Olympic Games are supposed to showcase the best of human athleticism and sportsmanship, but sometimes things can go horribly wrong. That was the case in the 1904 Olympics in St. Louis, where the marathon event was a complete mess. The course was dusty and hilly, and the organizer deliberately withheld water stations to test the effects of dehydration on the runners. As a result, many of the participants suffered from injuries, exhaustion, and even poisoning. The first-place finisher, Fred Lors, actually cheated by hitching a ride in a car for most of the race. He later claimed he did it as a joke. The second-place finisher, Thomas Hicks, was given a mixture of egg whites and strychnine, or rat poison, by his trainers as a stimulant. He collapsed several times and had to be carried across the finish line by his handlers. The fourth-place finisher, Anderin Carbajal, was a Cuban mailman who ran in dress shoes and pants. He stopped at an orchard for a snack during the race, but the apples were rotten and gave him stomach cramps. He decided to take a nap by the roadside before resuming the race. Only 14 out of 32 runners managed to finish the marathon, making it one of the worst sporting events in history. In 1932, the Australian government declared war on a group of emus that were causing damage to crops and fences in Western Australia. The military was sent to deal with the problem, armed with machine guns and rifles. However, the emus proved to be very fast, agile, and resilient, and managed to evade or survive the bullets. The soldiers only killed about 250 emus out of an estimated 20,000. The operation was a failure and a public embarrassment, and the government eventually called off the war. The dancing plague. In 1518, a woman named Frau Trophia started dancing in the streets of Strasbourg, France, for no apparent reason. She kept dancing for days, and soon other people joined her. Within a month, about 400 people were dancing uncontrollably, some of them collapsing or dying from exhaustion, heart attack, or stroke. No one knows what caused this bizarre phenomenon, but some possible explanations include mass hysteria, ergot poisoning, or religious fervor. The Great Molasses Flood. On January 15, 1919, a large storage tank containing 2.3 million gallons of molasses burst in Boston's North End neighborhood. The molasses spilled out and formed a wave that was 25 feet high and 35 miles per hour. It swept through the streets, crushing buildings, vehicles, and people. The flood killed 21 people and injured 150 more. The cleanup took months, and the area smelled of molasses for years. The cause of the tank's rupture was never conclusively determined, but some factors include poor construction, temperature fluctuations, and fermentation. The Taiping Rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion was a civil war in China that lasted from 1850 to 1864. It was led by Hong Xiuquan, a failed civil service exam candidate who claimed to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ. He wanted to overthrow the Qing dynasty and establish a new Christian kingdom called the Heavenly Kingdom of Great Peace. He gathered millions of followers who shared his religious vision and social reforms. The rebellion was one of the deadliest conflicts in history, with an estimated death toll of 20 to 30 million people. The Cadaver Synod. The Cadaver Synod was a trial that took place in 897 CE, in which Pope Stephen VI put the corpse of his predecessor Pope Formosus on trial for various crimes. The body of Formosus was exhumed from his tomb, dressed in papal robes, and seated on a throne. A deacon acted as his voice and answered the accusations of Stephen VI. The trial ended with Formosus being found guilty and stripped of his papal honors. His body was thrown into the Tiber River, but later recovered by his supporters, the Pepsi Navy. In 1989, Pepsi became the owner of the sixth largest navy in the world, surpassing countries like Australia and Spain. How did this happen? Well, it all started in 1959, when Pepsi made a deal with the Soviet Union to sell its soda in exchange for vodka. However, as the Soviet economy declined, they ran out of cash and had to pay Pepsi with other goods, such as oil, steel, and ships. Pepsi accepted the offer and sold the ships to a Swedish company for scrap metal. The deal was worth about $3 billion at the time. The Great Stink. In 1858, London was plagued by a terrible smell that came from the Thames River. The river was polluted with sewage, industrial waste, and dead animals, and the hot summer weather made it worse. The stench was so unbearable that it affected the Parliament, which had to close its windows and hang curtains soaked in lime. The smell also caused health problems and social unrest among the population. The Great Stink prompted the government to invest in a massive sewer system that improved the sanitation and hygiene of the city. The Exploding Whale. In 1970, a sperm whale carcass washed up on a beach in Oregon. The local authorities decided to get rid of it by blowing it up with dynamite, thinking that the pieces would be eaten by seagulls or washed away by the tide. However, they used too many explosives and created a huge blast that sent chunks of whale flesh flying everywhere. Some of the pieces landed on nearby cars and buildings, causing damage and disgust. The event was captured on film by a local news reporter and became a viral sensation years later. The War of the Bucket. In 1325, two rival city-states in Italy, Bologna and Modena, fought a war over a wooden bucket. The bucket had been stolen by some Modenese soldiers during a raid on Bologna's territory. The Bolognese demanded its return, but the Modenese refused and mocked them. This sparked a full-scale war that lasted for several months and involved thousands of troops. The war ended with a decisive victory for Modena, who kept the bucket as a trophy. The bucket is still displayed in Modena's town hall today. The Pig War, 1859. What could lead to a confrontation between two major powers? A pig, apparently. In 1859, on San Juan Island between the US and British North America, an American farmer shot a British-owned pig for eating his potatoes. Both nations escalated the situation, with military presence increasing on the island. Thankfully, no human conflict ensued, and after negotiations, the territory was awarded to the US. All this fuss over a pig. The Great Stork Derby, 1926 to 1936. How many babies can one make in a decade? The Great Stork Derby aimed to find out. Charles Vance Miller, a wealthy Canadian lawyer, left a peculiar will. He bequeathed a portion of his estate to the Toronto woman who could birth the most children in 10 years. Multiple women competed, with the prize eventually split between 6 mothers, each having given birth to 9 children in the stipulated time. The London Beer Flood, 1814. While Boston had its molasses flood, London had its own sticky disaster. In 1814, a colossal vat at the Moe & Company brewery ruptured, releasing an immense amount of beer. Reports on the exact volume vary, with estimates ranging from 135,000 to as much as 300,000 gallons. However, the majority of sources lean towards the lower estimate of 135,000 gallons. Whichever the case, it's an undeniably staggering amount of beer to go to waste. The resulting beer tsunami demolished buildings and killed 8 people. It's a tragic event that's remembered as one of the most unusual industrial accidents. The attack of the dead men 1915. World War I had its share of horrors, but the attack of the dead men stands out as particularly eerie. In 1915, during the siege of Osowiec Fortress, German forces released a deadly cloud of chlorine gas against the Russian defenders. Believing all inside to be dead or fatally injured, the Germans advanced. But to their horror, the surviving Russians, coughing blood and with skin burning, launched a counterattack. This desperate act by the dead men successfully repelled the Germans, cementing the event as one of the war's most haunting stories. In our journey through bizarre historical events, it's not often we come across a war named after a body part. Yet, history never ceases to astonish. Amid the vast oceans and high-stakes world of 18th century sea trade, an event would spark a conflict between 2 global powers. This is British Sea Captain Robert Jenkins. And that ear in his hand. In the early 18th century, Jenkins claimed a Spanish Coast Guard had brutally cut off his ear as a punitive measure against smuggling. Displaying it in the British Parliament, Jenkins' ear wasn't just a gruesome memento. It became a symbol of Spanish atrocities and a rallying point for those seeking conflict. The outrage and political maneuverings eventually culminated in the War of Jenkins' Ear in 1739, a conflict largely fought in the Caribbean between the British and the Spanish. While its name might sound trivial, the war was a serious affair, intertwining with larger European conflicts and shaping the geopolitical landscape. In the annals of history, it serves as a reminder that even the smallest grievances, or in this case, a single ear, can echo loudly across empires. As we journey through history, we're often met with tales of bravery, innovation, and progress. But as we've seen today, history is also filled with its fair share of the bizarre, the unexpected, and the downright unbelievable. From wars sparked by pigs and ears to mammoth beer floods, our past never ceases to surprise and amuse. Thank you for joining us on this peculiar trip down memory lane. Share with us in the comments below what you thought the strangest event was in this video. And if you enjoyed these tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more curious chronicles from history. Until next time, keep wondering, keep questioning, and always remember, the truth is often stranger than fiction.